My girlfriend scoffed. Stop being possessive. Say sorry to him, when I questioned her male bestie having her house key. I thought I was asking for basic respect in a relationship, but apparently, I was the problem. That's what Cassie made crystal clear the morning after Marcus walked in on us without warning, using his spare key like he owned the place. I'm Trevor, 29, been working as a paramedic for the Chicago Fire Department for 6 years now. Seen enough domestic situations to know when something feels off, but I'd been dating Cassie for nearly 2 years and figured I should trust her judgment about her childhood friend Marcus. That trust got tested real quick when I was kissing my girlfriend in her living room last Tuesday evening, thinking we had privacy, only to hear the front door click open and Marcus stroll in like he lived there. Oh shit, sorry guys, he laughed, not looking particularly sorry as Cassie scrambled to adjust her shirt. Didn't realize you had company, Cass. Company. Like I was some random hookup instead of her boyfriend of almost 2 years. Marcus is 31, married to his college sweetheart Lauren, and has this way of making me feel like an outsider in my own relationship. He's one of those guys who remembers every inside joke from high school, brings up stories I wasn't part of, and somehow makes his constant presence in Cassie's life seem completely normal. The spare key thing had always bothered me, but I'd never said anything because Cassie would get this defensive look whenever I questioned their friendship. This time felt different though. Walking in during an intimate moment crossed a line I couldn't ignore. Maybe you should call ahead next time, I said, keeping my voice calm and reasonable. Just so we know to expect you. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Marcus's easy smile tightened, and Cassie shot me a look that could have melted steel. It was just a mistake, Trevor, she said, her voice carrying that warning tone I'd learned to recognize. Marcus has had that key for years. It's not like he planned this. But that was exactly my point. Having a key for years didn't mean he should use it without checking first, especially when her boyfriend was over. I work odd shifts at the fire station, sometimes pulling 24-hour rotations, so I'm not always at Cassie's place. Made sense that emergencies happen and trusted friends need access. What didn't make sense was treating her apartment like a revolving door when basic courtesy could avoid awkward situations. I get that accidents happen, I said, looking directly at Marcus. I'm just saying maybe a quick text or call would prevent this kind of thing in the future. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Cassie and me like he was waiting for her to handle the situation. Which she did, just not the way I expected. You're being ridiculous, Cassie said, crossing her arms. Marcus isn't some stranger. He's like family. We grew up together. His mom practically raised me after my parents divorced. The family angle was her go-to defense whenever I expressed any discomfort about their relationship. Marcus had been her emergency contact until I came along, knew her coffee order better than I did, and somehow always appeared during her bad days with flowers or her favorite takeout. Their connection ran deep, I understood that. But understanding something doesn't mean you have to be comfortable with every aspect of it. I'm not asking him to give up the key, I said carefully. Just maybe use it more thoughtfully. That's when Cassie really lost it. Stop being possessive, she snapped, her voice getting that sharp edge that meant the conversation was about to spiral. This is exactly the kind of controlling behavior that ruins relationships. Marcus has never done anything inappropriate. He's married, for God's sake. Married to Lauren, a sweet woman who worked as a pediatric nurse and treated Cassie like a sister. Lauren, who had no idea her husband was currently making her boyfriend feel like an intruder in his own relationship. I never said he did anything inappropriate, I replied, fighting to keep my voice level. I'm talking about basic courtesy. But Marcus was already putting on his jacket, playing the wounded party perfectly. You know what, I should go, he said, looking genuinely hurt. I never meant to make anyone uncomfortable. Maybe I should just return the key if it's going to cause problems. The manipulation was smooth, I had to give him credit. Frame my reasonable request as an attack on their friendship, make himself the victim, and let Cassie rush to reassure him. Which she did, exactly on cue. Don't be ridiculous, she told him, shooting another glare in my direction. You're not giving up anything. Trevor's just being oversensitive. Oversensitive. That stung more than I expected. In my line of work, reading situations quickly and trusting your instincts keeps people alive. When something feels wrong, you pay attention. Right now, everything about this situation felt wrong, But apparently, my professional instincts didn't count for much in my personal life. After Marcus left, Cassie and I had what she called a discussion, and I would describe as her explaining why I was wrong about everything. She agreed to mention my concerns to Marcus, but made it clear she thought I was overreacting to what she called a simple mistake between old friends. I went home that night wondering if I was actually being possessive, or if I just learned something important about where I ranked in my girlfriend's priorities. Turned out, I was about to discover exactly how little I knew about Marcus and his definition of appropriate behavior. The guilt trip started 3 days later when Cassie called me at the station, her voice tight with frustration. "Marcus feels completely disrespected," she announced, like I'd committed some unforgivable sin. "He says he feels unwelcome in my apartment now, like he can't even check on me without worrying about offending your delicate sensibilities." I was restocking our ambulance after a rough call, a domestic violence situation where the woman kept making excuses for her partner's behavior, and the irony wasn't lost on me. "Did you explain that I just asked him to call first?" I asked, pulling off my latex gloves. "That's not the point, Trevor. The point is that you made him feel like he was doing something wrong when he's been nothing but a good friend to me for 15 years. 15 years. She always brought up the timeline like it automatically trumped any concerns I might have. What she didn't know was that for the past 8 months, I'd been sitting on information that completely changed how I viewed Marcus's definition of being a good friend. It started at Jamie and Sarah's backyard barbecue last summer. Marcus had been drinking, laughing loud, telling stories about his college days with Lauren. When he went to the bathroom, his phone buzzed on the picnic table where he'd left it face up. The notification preview showed a message from someone named Amber_Chicago23, with a thumbnail photo that definitely wasn't Lauren. The message preview read, "Can't wait for tomorrow night. Same hotel." I shouldn't have looked, but once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. When Marcus came back, I watched him quickly swipe the notification away, checking to see if anyone had noticed. Our eyes met for a split second, and I saw something flicker across his face before he grabbed his phone and shoved it in his pocket. That might have been the end of it, just a moment of uncomfortable knowledge I could pretend I never had, but then I started noticing things. Marcus at Luigi's downtown with a brunette who wasn't Lauren, his hand on her lower back as they waited for a table. A few weeks later, same thing at the new sushi place on Michigan Avenue, different woman entirely, blonde this time, clearly more than friends based on how she was laughing and touching his arm. Both times I was with my partner Rodriguez, grabbing quick meals between calls, too far away to confront him even if I'd wanted to. Which I didn't. Because what was I supposed to do? Walk up to a married man I barely tolerated and accuse him of cheating based on restaurant sightings? Tell his wife, who seemed genuinely happy, that her husband was meeting women for what sure looked like dates? It wasn't my marriage, wasn't my business, and I figured Lauren was smart enough to figure things out if she needed to. But now, listening to Cassie demand I apologize to the same man I'd watched betray his wife multiple times, the hypocrisy was suffocating. "You know what?" Cassie continued, her voice getting that determined tone that meant she'd already decided how this was going to go. "You're going to apologize to him. Tonight. I'm not letting this ridiculous jealousy ruin my oldest friendship." Apologize for what exactly? Asking for basic courtesy? But I could already hear the defeat in my own voice. This was going to happen whether I wanted it or not, because Cassie had decided Marcus's hurt feelings mattered more than my reasonable boundaries. For making him feel unwelcome. For questioning his intentions. For treating him like some kind of threat when he's married and has never been anything but respectful. Respectful. The word almost made me laugh, thinking about those hotel reservations and restaurant dates. But what was I going to say? Actually, Cassie, your precious childhood friend is cheating on his wife, so maybe his moral authority isn't what you think it is? She'd never believe me. Would probably accuse me of making things up because I was jealous. Which, according to her, I clearly was. Fine, I said, because sometimes keeping peace in your relationship means swallowing things that taste like poison. I'll apologize. The relief in her voice was immediate and complete. Thank you. I knew you'd do the right thing once you thought about it. Marcus really is one of the good ones, Trevor. Once you get to know him better, you'll see what I mean. One of the good ones. I ended the call and stared at the Chicago skyline through the station windows, Thinking about Lauren planning what she'd mentioned was going to be their 10-year anniversary cruise next month. Thinking about how excited she'd been talking about it at Sarah's birthday party, how Marcus had smiled and nodded along while checking his phone every few minutes. Thinking about how I was about to apologize to a man who was systematically destroying his marriage while positioning himself as the victim in my relationship. The irony was going to eat me alive, but I'd made my decision. If Cassie wanted me to apologize to Marcus, I'd give him an apology he'd never forget. And maybe, just maybe, I'd finally stop being the only person in this situation who seemed to give a damn about the truth. Cassie was practically glowing when she called me the next evening. Perfect news. Lauren's hosting one of her dinner parties this Saturday, and she specifically asked me to make sure you and Marcus work things out. The enthusiasm in her voice made my stomach turn. She's making that incredible lasagna you love, and it'll be our whole group: Jamie and Sarah, David and Nicole, all the usual suspects. It's the perfect opportunity for you to clear the air with Marcus. I was sitting in my apartment, still in my CFD t-shirt after a 12-hour shift, staring at a beer I hadn't opened yet. You already told them I'm apologizing? I may have mentioned that you realized you overreacted and wanted to make things right, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Lauren was so relieved. She hates when there's tension in the group, and she really likes you, Trevor. She keeps saying what a good influence you are on me. What a good influence. If only Lauren knew that her husband's biggest defender was about to become his worst nightmare. Marcus is being really mature about the whole thing, Cassie continued. He said he's willing to put it behind us if you're genuinely sorry. See? I told you he was a good guy. I spent the week doing something I'd never done before in my life, planning a confrontation. Tuesday after my shift, I drove past Luigi's and confirmed what I remembered about the layout, the lighting, how clearly you could see the tables from the street. Wednesday, I did the same thing at the sushi place on Michigan Avenue. Thursday, I sat in my truck outside the Hampton in downtown where I'd seen Marcus's BMW parked twice in the past month, timing how long it took to walk from the parking garage to the lobby. I felt like I was planning a tactical operation, which in a way, I was. The weight of keeping Lauren in the dark while watching her excitedly plan their anniversary cruise was crushing me. She'd cornered me at Sarah's birthday party 2 weeks ago, bubbling over with details about the itinerary she'd booked. 10 years married, can you believe it? She'd said, her face lighting up in that way that made everyone around her smile. Marcus keeps joking that he's stuck with me now, but honestly, I fall in love with him more every year. He's been working so hard lately, putting in all these extra hours to make sure we can afford the cruise without touching our savings. Extra hours. I nodded and smiled and hated myself for it, watching Marcus across the room charming Jamie's sister while his wife talked about falling in love with him more every year. The man was a sociopath, and somehow I was the bad guy for asking him to knock before entering my girlfriend's apartment. Friday night, Cassie came over to my place with takeout and that satisfied expression she got when she thought she'd successfully managed a situation. I'm so proud of you for doing this, she said, unpacking Thai food on my coffee table. It shows real maturity, being willing to admit when you're wrong. I wasn't wrong, but I was about to prove exactly how right I'd been in the most spectacular way possible. Lauren's been cooking all day, Cassie continued. She's so excited to have everyone together. She keeps texting me about how this dinner is going to be perfect, how happy she is that you and Marcus are working things out like adults. Perfect. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Saturday afternoon, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, adjusting my collar and trying to convince myself I was doing the right thing. In my line of work, we have a saying, sometimes you have to break bones to save lives. What I was about to do would break more than bones, but maybe it would save Lauren from wasting any more years on a marriage that was already dead. She deserved to know the truth before she spent her life savings on an anniversary cruise with a man who was celebrating their decade together by sleeping with random women from dating apps. I drove to Marcus and Lauren's suburban house with my hands steady on the wheel, my mind clear about what needed to happen. Cassie met me at the door, beaming like she'd orchestrated world peace. Everyone's here already, she said, linking her arm through mine. Marcus is in the kitchen helping Lauren with the wine. This is going to be such a great evening. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see Lauren laughing at something Marcus was saying, her hand resting affectionately on his shoulder while he opened a bottle of wine. She looked genuinely happy, completely unaware that her husband had been systematically betraying her trust for years while her best friend orchestrated apologies on his behalf. "Ready to make things right?" Cassie whispered, squeezing my arm encouragingly. I looked around the room at our friends, all of them expecting a simple apology and a return to normal. Jamie and Sarah were setting up a board game on the side table. David and Nicole were looking through Lauren's photo albums from their recent trip to Napa. Everyone relaxed and comfortable, preparing for what they thought would be just another pleasant evening with friends. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady and calm. "I'm ready to make things right." Dinner started exactly like every other gathering at Marcus and Lauren's house. Lauren had outdone herself with the lasagna, the dining room table was set with her grandmother's china, and everyone was laughing about David's latest disaster at his accounting firm. I sat there making small talk, watching Marcus play the perfect husband, refilling Lauren's wine glass and telling stories about their upcoming anniversary cruise. 10 years next month, he said, raising his glass in a toast. "Here's to my beautiful wife, who somehow still puts up with me after all this time." Everyone raised their glasses, smiling at what looked like genuine marital happiness. Lauren beamed, leaning over to kiss his cheek. "He's being modest," she said. "Marcus has been working so hard lately to make sure we can afford this cruise. All those late nights at the office, weekend client meetings. I'm married to the most dedicated man in Chicago. Late nights at the office. Weekend client meetings." I took a long sip of wine and waited for the right moment. It came during dessert, when Cassie decided it was time to address the elephant in the room. "So," she said brightly, looking between Marcus and me, "I think Trevor has something he'd like to say." The table went quiet, all eyes turning to me expectantly. Marcus leaned back in his chair with that magnanimous expression people get when they're about to graciously accept an apology they feel they deserve. Lauren looked hopeful, clearly wanting her dinner party to end with reconciliation and restored harmony. "Actually, I do have something to say," I began, setting down my fork and looking directly at Marcus. "I want to apologize for questioning your use of Cassie's apartment key." Marcus nodded approvingly, already basking in his vindication. "I realize now that I was completely out of line," I continued, my voice calm and measured. "A man who's been nothing but loyal and faithful in all his relationships deserves better treatment than that." Something flickered in Marcus's expression, but I kept going. "Which is why I think Lauren deserves to know about your profiles on 3 different dating websites." The silence that followed was deafening. Lauren's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. Jamie's fork clattered against his plate. Sarah actually gasped. Marcus went white, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Trevor, what are you talking about?" Cassie demanded, but I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was focused entirely on Lauren, whose face was cycling through confusion, denial, and dawning horror. "I'm talking about Amber from the Hampton Inn," I said, keeping my voice gentle but clear. "And Jessica from Luigi's restaurant. And whatever her name was at the sushi place on Michigan Avenue." "You're insane," Marcus finally managed to say, but his voice cracked. "I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but the Hampton Inn charges $89 a night for their standard rooms," I continued, still speaking directly to Lauren. "I know because I looked it up after I saw Marcus's BMW in their parking garage. Twice. On nights when he told you he was working late." Lauren set down her wine glass with mechanical precision. "Marcus?" she said quietly. "What is he talking about?" "He's lying," Marcus said, but sweat was beading on his forehead. "He's making this up because he's jealous of our friendship, because he can't handle that Cassie has other important people in her life." "The second phone," Lauren said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I found it in your car last week. You said it was for work." The room erupted. David stood up so fast his chair tipped over. Nicole grabbed Sarah's hand like she needed an anchor. Cassie was staring at me with absolute fury and disbelief. But Marcus was completely focused on his wife, watching 10 years of careful deception crumble in real time. "Lauren, baby, let me explain," he started, reaching for her hand. She yanked it back like he'd burned her. "Explain what?" "Explain the credit card statements I've been finding? The receipts you thought you hid? The way you've been treating me like I'm paranoid for asking questions?" "You knew." Marcus's voice was barely audible. "I've suspected for months," Lauren said, standing up from the table with eerie calm. But every time I tried to talk to you about it or asked Cassie for advice, I was told I was being insecure, that I should trust you more. That good husbands like you don't just throw away 10-year marriages for random hookups. She turned to look at Cassie, who had gone pale. You knew, didn't you? That's why you were always so quick to reassure me. Why you always had explanations for his behavior. I was protecting you, Cassie whispered. I knew he'd stop eventually. I thought You thought what? That I was too weak to handle the truth? That I deserved to live in a fantasy while my husband made a fool of me? Lauren's voice was rising now, years of suppressed suspicion and gaslighting finally breaking free. Marcus tried one last desperate play. This is ridiculous. You're going to believe some paranoid accusations over your own husband? Over 10 years of marriage. 10 years of marriage? Lauren laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean 10 years of me working extra shifts to pay for your business trips? 10 years of me making excuses to our friends when you disappeared for hours? 10 years of me questioning my own sanity because you made me feel crazy for noticing what was right in front of me? She walked to the hall closet and pulled out a suitcase that had clearly been packed and waiting. I want you out of my house. Tonight. The room was dead silent except for the sound of Marcus's world imploding. Lauren, please, he said, his voice breaking. We can work through this. It didn't mean anything. It was just Just what? Just sex? Just lies? Just you destroying our marriage while I planned our anniversary cruise? She threw the suitcase at his feet. Get out. Before I call my lawyer. Marcus looked around the room desperately, searching for an ally, someone who might take his side. But David was shaking his head in disgust. Jamie had his arm around Sarah, who was crying. Nicole was staring at him like he was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. And Cassie was backing toward the door, finally understanding that her careful management of the situation had just exploded in the most spectacular way possible. This isn't over, Marcus said, grabbing his suitcase and heading for the door. You'll regret this, Lauren. All of you will regret this. But Lauren wasn't listening anymore. She was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Thank you, she said simply. I know this wasn't easy for you to do, but thank you for finally telling me the truth. The next morning, Cassie stormed into my apartment like a hurricane, her key turning in the lock before I was fully awake. What the hell did you do? She screamed, standing in my bedroom doorway with mascara streaked down her cheeks. Do you have any idea what you've destroyed? I sat up in bed, checking the clock. 7:30 a.m. She'd probably been up all night, either crying or plotting my destruction, maybe both. I told the truth, I said simply. Something you apparently forgot how to do. The truth. She laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. You humiliated my best friend. You destroyed a marriage. You made me look like an idiot in front of all our friends. How long, Cassie? I asked, getting out of bed and pulling on a t-shirt. How long have you known about Marcus? The question stopped her mid-rant. Her face went through several expressions before settling on defiant guilt. I don't know what you're talking about. Try again. Because Lauren asked you for advice about his behavior for months, and you kept telling her she was being paranoid. That doesn't happen by accident. Cassie's shoulders sagged, the fight going out of her all at once. She walked to my kitchen and slumped against the counter. 18 months, she whispered. Maybe longer. 18 months. I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. You've known he was cheating on Lauren for a year and a half, and you said nothing? It wasn't that simple. The defensive anger was back. He promised me it was just a phase, that he was going through some kind of midlife crisis. He said he'd stop. And you believed him. I wanted to believe him. Lauren was so happy, Trevor. She was planning their anniversary, talking about maybe starting a family after the cruise. How was I supposed to destroy all that? By telling her the truth before she spent her life savings on a romantic getaway with a serial cheater? I was getting angry now, the full scope of her betrayal becoming clear. How were you helping her by letting her live in a fantasy? I was protecting her. Cassie shouted. From unnecessary pain. From having to start over at 30. From losing the only stable thing in her life. What about the women he was sleeping with? Were you protecting them too? That's different. How is that different? But even as I asked, pieces were falling into place. Jesus, Cassie. You helped him, didn't you? That's why he needed your key. She turned away, staring out my kitchen window like the Chicago skyline might save her from this conversation. It wasn't like that. What was it like? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you turned your apartment into a cheating hub while lecturing me about trust and friendship. He needed somewhere safe, she said quietly. Somewhere Lauren would never think to look. And it wasn't all the time, just occasionally when a hotel felt too risky. I felt sick. Actually physically nauseated. You let him bring other women to your apartment. The apartment where I sleep. Where I keep my things. You're never there during the day anyway. The casualness of it, like she was talking about borrowing a cup of sugar, made me want to throw something. That's not the point, Cassie. The point is that you made me an unwitting accomplice to destroying your best friend's marriage. I was trying to minimize the damage. If Marcus was going to cheat anyway, at least this way I could keep track of it. Make sure he was being safe. Try to talk sense into him. For 18 months. I kept hoping he'd come to his senses. That he'd realize what he was risking and stop on his own. She finally turned to look at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not just guilt, but genuine fear. You have no idea what you've done, Trevor. Lauren's going to lose everything. The house, half their savings, her entire life as she knows it. She was going to lose it anyway, I said. The only difference is now she gets to make her own choices about her future instead of living in a lie you helped maintain. I was protecting her, she said again, but weaker this time. You were protecting Marcus. There's a difference. The truth of it hung in the air between us. Cassie had spent 18 months enabling Marcus's affairs while gaslighting his wife, and somehow she'd convinced herself she was the hero of this story. Did you ever think about what would happen when she found out? Because she was going to find out eventually, Cassie. They always do. I thought he'd stop. I thought once he got it out of his system, this wasn't him getting something out of his system. This was a pattern. A lifestyle. And you were part of it. She started crying then, real tears this time instead of the angry, frustrated ones from earlier. I never meant for it to go this far. It started with just one woman, just one mistake, and Marcus begged me not to tell Lauren. Said it would destroy her for no reason since it was never going to happen again. But it did happen again. Again and again and again, she sobbed. And every time he promised it was the last time. Every time, I believed him because the alternative was watching my best friend's world fall apart. So instead, you helped tear it down piece by piece while she paid for the privilege. Cassie looked at me with something that might have been hatred. You're so righteous, aren't you? So sure you did the right thing. Well, congratulations, Trevor. You got your revenge on Marcus, and all it cost was Lauren's happiness and our relationship. Our relationship ended the moment you decided Marcus's secrets were more important than basic honesty. I just didn't know it yet. I walked to my front door and opened it. I think you should leave. She gathered her purse and jacket, moving like someone in a daze. At the door, she stopped and looked back at me. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I really thought I was doing the right thing. I know you did, I replied. That's what makes this so much worse. 3 days later, Lauren called me. Could we meet for coffee? She asked, her voice steady but tired. There are some things I'd like to discuss, if you're willing. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, one of those places with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Lauren looked different, older somehow, but also more solid, like she'd stopped floating and finally planted her feet on the ground. I wanted to thank you again, she said once we'd ordered. I know what you did wasn't easy, and I know it probably cost you your relationship with Cassie. That relationship was built on a lie anyway, I said. I just didn't realize it at the time. Lauren nodded, stirring sugar into her coffee with mechanical precision. I need to tell you something. About how long I've known, about what I've been doing behind the scenes. She pulled out a manila folder from her bag and set it on the table between us. I've been documenting Marcus's affairs for 8 months. Credit card statements, phone records, photographs, hotel receipts. I hired a private investigator 6 weeks ago. I stared at her. You knew everything? Not everything, but enough. Enough to know my marriage was over, enough to protect myself legally, enough to make sure I wouldn't be left with nothing when this all came to light. She opened the folder and showed me a stack of papers that would have made any divorce attorney smile. But what I didn't know was the extent of Cassie's involvement. Her voice got quieter. She was my closest friend, Trevor. When I started having suspicions about Marcus, she was the first person I called. Every time I found something suspicious, every time my gut told me something was wrong, I went to her for advice. And she told you that you were being paranoid. Every single time. Marcus loves you and you're just being insecure. Marriage is hard, you have to trust each other. She made me feel guilty for doubting him, made me think I was the problem. Lauren's hands were shaking slightly as she flipped through the documentation. The worst part is that I started to believe her. Started to think maybe I was losing my mind, seeing threats that weren't there. Gaslighting, I said quietly. That's what it's called when someone makes you question your own reality. I looked it up, she said with a bitter smile. Turns out there's a name for everything Marcus and Cassie were doing to me. But here's what really gets me. Last month, when I found that second phone in Marcus's car, you know what Cassie said? I waited. She said maybe it was a surprise for our anniversary. Maybe he was planning something special and didn't want me to find out. She actually convinced me to put it back and pretend I hadn't seen it. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. She was actively working against you. For 18 months, Lauren confirmed. 18 months of her reassuring me that I was wrong, that I should trust my husband more, that good marriages require faith. All while she was providing him with a safe place to betray me. She pulled out another set of documents. My private investigator confirmed it. Marcus used Cassie's apartment at least 12 times in the past 6 months alone. Different women, always during the day when you were at work. I'm so sorry, Lauren. I had no idea how deep this went. How could you? You were being manipulated too, just differently. Cassie was managing all of us, keeping us all in our assigned roles while Marcus destroyed our marriage with her full support. Lauren closed the folder and looked at me directly. But here's what I want you to understand. What you did at that dinner party wasn't cruel or vindictive. It was the first honest thing anyone had said to me in over a year. It felt pretty brutal in the moment. It was brutal, but it was also necessary. I was 3 weeks away from spending $8,000 on an anniversary cruise with a man who was celebrating our decade together by sleeping with women he met online. The only thing worse than learning the truth would have been not learning it. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You gave me back my agency, Trevor. My ability to make decisions about my own life based on reality instead of carefully crafted lies. What happens now? Now I file for divorce with 8 months of documentation and a paper trail that shows systematic deception and financial infidelity. Now I keep the house, most of our savings, and my self-respect. She smiled, and for the first time since I'd known her, it looked completely genuine. And now I get to rebuild my life surrounded by people who actually care about my well-being. What about Cassie? What about her? She made her choice 18 months ago when she decided Marcus's comfort was more important than my right to know the truth about my own marriage. Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive. Lauren finished her coffee and gathered her papers. I've moved in with my sister for now, but I'm looking at apartments downtown. Close to the hospital where I work, close to friends who actually deserve that title. As we stood to leave, she paused. Can I ask you something? How long were you carrying around the knowledge about Marcus before you finally said something? 8 months, I admitted, and it was eating me alive. Good, she said firmly. That means you have a conscience. That means you understand the weight of truth and lies. Cassie carried the same knowledge for more than twice as long and slept just fine. Outside the cafe, Lauren hugged me goodbye. Thank you for being brave enough to tell me what everyone else was too cowardly to say. Thank you for caring more about my future than your own comfort. I watched her walk away, shoulders straight, purpose in her step. She looked like someone who'd finally stopped apologizing for taking up space in her own life. The confrontation with Cassie happened 2 weeks later when she showed up at my apartment unannounced, looking like she hadn't slept in days. We need to talk, she said, pushing past me into my living room. This has gone too far, Trevor. You've destroyed everything. I closed the door and followed her, noting how different she looked. The confident, managing version of Cassie had been replaced by someone who seemed genuinely lost. What's gone too far? I asked. Lauren filed for divorce yesterday. She's taking Marcus for everything he's worth, and now everyone in our friend group thinks I'm some kind of monster. She collapsed onto my couch like all the fight had gone out of her. Jamie won't return my calls. Sarah blocked me on social media. Even David, who barely knows any of us that well, told Nicole he doesn't want me at their engagement party. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? I thought people would understand that I was trying to protect everyone, that I was caught in an impossible situation. Cassie looked up at me with genuine confusion. How is that so hard to grasp? Because you weren't protecting anyone, Cassie. You were enabling Marcus while gaslighting Lauren. There's a difference. I was preventing unnecessary pain. Whose pain? Because it sure wasn't Lauren's. She spent 18 months questioning her own sanity while you reassured Marcus that his secrets were safe. Cassie's face crumpled. You don't understand what it was like being caught between them. Marcus kept promising he'd stop, that he just needed time to work through whatever was happening to him. And Lauren was so happy when she wasn't suspicious. I thought if I could just manage the situation until Marcus came to his senses. Manage the situation, I repeated. That's what this was to you? A situation to be managed instead of a marriage being destroyed. I never wanted it to go this far, she whispered. It started with just one woman, just one mistake. Marcus was devastated, said it was the biggest regret of his life. He begged me not to tell Lauren because it would destroy her for no reason since it was never going to happen again. But you knew it would happen again. I hoped it wouldn't. And when it did, I thought maybe it was just a phase, something he needed to get out of his system. By the time I realized it was a pattern, I was in too deep. How was I supposed to tell Lauren I'd been lying to her for months? The same way you should have told her from the beginning. With honesty. Cassie started crying, the kind of exhausted tears that come from fighting a battle you know you've already lost. Marcus threw me under the bus, she said bitterly. When Lauren's lawyer contacted him for the divorce proceedings, he told them I was obsessed with him, that I helped him cheat because I was jealous of their marriage and wanted to break them up. I stared at her. You're surprised by that? I protected him for 18 months. I lied to my best friend, I let him use my apartment, I covered for him with elaborate alibis. And the minute things got difficult, he made me the villain to save himself. What did you expect? Loyalty? From a man who spent years betraying his wife. The irony seemed lost on her, but I pressed on. You enabled a sociopath, Cassie. Did you really think he'd protect you when his own interests were at stake? I thought we were friends, she said quietly. I thought he cared about me, at least enough not to destroy my reputation to save his own skin. Marcus never cared about anyone but Marcus. That's why he was cheating in the first place. I sat down across from her, feeling something like pity mixed with disgust. The question is, why did you care about protecting him more than protecting Lauren? She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. I don't know, she finally admitted. Maybe because Lauren was always so strong, so capable. She had her career, her independence. I thought she could handle anything. But Marcus seemed so fragile when he was confessing his mistakes, so genuinely torn up about what he'd done. So you decided Lauren could handle being betrayed, but Marcus couldn't handle the consequences of his choices. When you put it like that, it sounds terrible. It was terrible. And now you're facing the consequences of enabling it for 18 months. Cassie looked around my apartment like she was seeing it for the first time. Are we really over? I mean, I know what I did was wrong, but can't we work through this? Cassie, you let another man use your apartment to cheat on his wife while lecturing me about trust and respect. You spent over a year systematically gaslighting your best friend while helping her husband betray her. What exactly is there to work through? I was trying to minimize the damage. You were trying to avoid taking responsibility. There's a difference. She stood up slowly, gathering her purse and jacket. So that's it? 3 years together and you're just done. I'm done with people who think lying is kinder than truth. I'm done with people who think they know what's best for everyone else while ignoring the harm they're causing. I'm done with people who enable cruelty and call it compassion. At the door, she turned back one last time. You know, Trevor, you're not as righteous as you think you are. You kept Marcus's secret for 8 months too. You're right, I said. I did. And it was wrong, and I learned something about myself I didn't like. The difference is, when I had the chance to make it right, I told the truth instead of doubling down on the lies. And look how that worked out for everyone. Yeah, I said, opening the door. Look how it worked out. Lauren's free, Marcus is facing consequences for his actions, and you're learning that enabling bad behavior doesn't make you a good friend. Sounds like the truth worked out exactly like it should have. I closed the door behind her and realized I felt lighter than I had in months. Sometimes the hardest part of doing the right thing isn't the doing, it's accepting that some people will never forgive you for refusing to participate in their comfortable lies.